I trained him, gave him everything I knew, and then he smiled while shaking my hand, after accepting the promotion meant for me. My name is Elijah. I'm 35 years old, and for the last 6 years I was the lead account architect at a mid-sized software consultancy in Chicago. I didn't start that way. I came in through the support desk, answering late-night calls and untangling messy code bases no one else wanted to touch. I stayed past everyone else, studied documentation, while the office microwave hummed through another reheated burrito, and slowly through stubborn grit rather than pedigree. I earned my way into the room where the real deals happened. I'm not flashy. I don't use phrases like synergy, unless I'm mocking someone who does. And I don't insert myself into big meetings unless something's on fire. I just like building things that work, platforms that hum instead of glitch, API systems that don't buckle under pressure. Give me a problem, and I'll solve it without asking for a spotlight. For a while, that was enough. My name on internal reviews glowed with praise. Clients asked for me by name. The execs would drop phrases like, "Let Elijah look at it," whenever a contract came close to coming undone. I thought, stupidly, that being indispensable would mean something, that quietly fixing messes and refusing to climb on someone's shoulders to be seen would eventually be noticed on its own. Turns out people only look up when someone else points at the sky. That morning, I remember the stale taste of office coffee catching in my throat as I walked into the Monday team huddle. The boardroom buzzed more than usual, that fake kind of energy people force when they already know something you don't. Jared was standing near the projector, his shirt a little too crisp, the kind he usually reserved for client pitches. His eyes found mine as I pushed open the glass door. Something in his smile felt taut, controlled. My stomach knotted just slightly. When the VP started talking congratulatory tone, mentions of leadership pipelines and strategic vision, I knew. Jared had just been promoted to senior team lead. My title, or the one I had been told was under review for Q1. Every metric that made the role important, client satisfaction scores, delivery timelines, team mentorship hours, had my fingerprints on it. But Jared stood next to a slide showing quarter-over-quarter growth, with my graphs, my documentation style, even my phrasing. Bullet points I'd spent nights shaping so they'd land the way they should. He didn't even blink when the slide deck moved to key contributions. Just kept that smile on his face and adjusted the clicker like we should all be proud of him. I shook his hand anyway. I didn't want to be the guy who made a scene because someone else got the win. I wanted to believe maybe he didn't know. Maybe corporate had taken his name and decided he was the better mascot for the room full of suits. But then he leaned in, voice just quiet enough for only me. "Hey, couldn't have done it without your guidance," he said, clapping my back like we were teammates. That was when it landed. He knew exactly what he was doing. Hours later, I sat at my desk pretending to debug a line of code I'd already fixed that morning. My inbox pinged with the usual nonsense. Billing discrepancies, JIRA tickets I was supposed to weigh in on, a reminder from HR to complete my annual compliance training. But it all felt muted, distant, like my ears were full of water. I thought about the first week I met Jared. Eager, wide-eyed, still tripping over internal acronyms like SLA and CICD. I'd taken him under my wing because he reminded me of myself, just raw talent and a willingness to learn. I lent him my annotated diagrams, walked him through past project postmortems that had saved us thousands, even told him which board members cared about performance reports and which preferred storytelling with numbers. And every time he had a win, I told him so. Now I sat there with the rotten taste of betrayal in my mouth. Teams I helped build were lifting their coffees to him in celebration. Someone even ordered cake. I watched as people passed his desk, offering congratulations, backpats, exaggerated laughs. They were so quick to forget, or maybe it was easier to remember the guy who took the stage than the one who built it. I reminded myself not to let it show on my face, didn't want to give him that satisfaction, but inside, something cracked, just a little. Quietly. They handed my project, my most successful enterprise rollout, to Jared, a guy I'd been mentoring for 2 years. I thought we were tight. We used to grab lunch every other Friday, split jokes over Slack, even teamed up on a gaming server a few weekends. I taught him things that took me years to learn, gave him annotated documents with examples I'd built out by hand, When he had questions at midnight before deadlines, I answered them. When he fumbled with client relationships, I coached him through. But apparently, the trust only went one way. I'd been out sick for 4 days. That Q4 review meeting. The one where we were supposed to pitch the success metrics from the Parallax platform rollout. I'd prepped everything in advance. Documentation, engagement strategies, milestone graphs. The whole kit. Jared had access, and I told him to help push the deck if necessary. He did more than push. He repackaged the entire thing as his. I came back to handshakes and backpats, none aimed at me. I heard laughter from the boardroom the morning I returned. I found out later they'd toasted Jared for turning around the Parallax account. There was even a photo of him giving that fake humble shrug next to the head of sales. A week later, they announced his promotion. Senior team lead. I wasn't just excluded from the conversation. I wasn't even mentioned. My name never touched the slide deck. My change logs had been stripped. The metrics that lived in my folders had been exported, edited to remove author data, and then cleanly inserted into his report. At our Monday check-in, Jared had the nerve to act surprised. Told me it all moved really fast, and that leadership just kind of looped him in as the face since I had been out. "You were missed, though," he said, like it was a shared victory and not a complete betrayal. What stung wasn't just what he did. It was how easy it was for everyone to buy it. Some people I thought respected me. I'd carried that Parallax account on my back when they were about to cancel at Q2. Rebuilt the platform to specs nobody else had time for. Jared had been shadowing me. Sure, but that's all he had done. Shadowed. And now? He was walking by my desk in his fitted blazer, giving two-fingered waves like a politician. The junior devs I used to mentor now forwarded my request to him for sign-off. One even copied me on a message and wrote, "Looping Elijah for technical perspective. Senior lead. Jared can advise for business direction." Every day after that felt like being airbrushed out of a group photo I helped organize. I'd suggest product iterations during team huddles, only to hear Jared rephrase them moments later with confident authority. His phrasing? "Let's take that idea and elevate it," like I just handed him raw clay and he was Da Vinci. One time I submitted a code branch improvement that cut execution time by 18%. He committed it under his own name later that night and posted a summary in the general channel with emojis and motivational taglines. People replied with fire emojis. I stared blankly at the screen. That month, HR launched an internal leaderboard highlighting employee spotlights. Jared made it twice. I wasn't listed. I stopped staying late. Not out of bitterness at first, I just didn't have the drive. I'd walk past the break room and hear bursts of laughter and clinking mugs. I knew that sound once. I used to be part of it. Now people glanced at me like I was a desk decoration that hadn't been updated. My performance reviews, once glowing and full of forward-looking promises, suddenly became vague. Team cohesion could improve. Consider staying in sync with strategic leadership. Strategic leadership meaning Jared. I started to worry if he could sell them my past. What was stopping him from stealing my future? What haunted me most wasn't the job title. It was the feeling I'd become unneeded. I didn't sleep well. I kept replaying that day in my head. The smiling faces clapping for the wrong man, and me, watching through the glass like some outsider. I knew what I had built. I knew the weekends I'd sacrificed, the lines of code I'd debugged until my eyes bled, but now it felt like I was the only one who remembered. Imposter syndrome is a strange thing. Even when you know you're right, even when the data is on your side, if nobody else says your name, you start wondering if you dreamed all your accomplishments. One night, I was alone in the office long after everyone left. I stood in front of the window, looking down at the streetlights melting into puddles in the rain. There was a framed photo behind Jared's desk, now him shaking hands with our CTO. His desktop wallpaper? A Parallax mock-up I had designed. I loaded that same mock-up on my own screen next to the Git logs. I scrolled through the timestamps until I found my own name attached to the first change. 16 hours logged that weekend. No one else clocked a minute. Somewhere deep down, a part of me began to smolder. Not anger, not yet. Just the slow burn of realization. I didn't need credit to live. But when someone strips it from you and the world believes the lie, you start to see that silence isn't always humble. Sometimes it's complicity. I shut my laptop And just like that, a different Elijah began to wake up. The call came late Tuesday afternoon, right as I was wrapping up a notes compilation for an internal API audit. Caller ID said restricted, but the voice was a familiar one. It belonged to Eva Granger, one of our longest-standing clients. She'd always been sharp, a little blunt, but never impolite. She skipped the small talk and got right to it. Elijah, I just wanted to thank you. The invoice module integration you rolled out last quarter has finally been saving us the kind of time you promised. Jared's follow-up walkthrough really helped tie it together. Follow-up? My stomach went cold. I had spent 6 weeks building that custom module after Eva's team requested improvements no one else in our portfolio needed. It was patchy at first, back-end legacy code, weird vendor dependencies, but I'd brute-forced it into something useful. I'd shared early screenshots with Eva directly. At the time, she had replied, "Looks solid, classic Elijah magic." And now Jared was somehow presenting it as his. "Glad it's working out," I managed, voice flat. We ended the call a minute later, but I didn't move. Just sat there in the quiet hum of the office, listening to the mechanics of my own breathing. Somewhere down the hall, Jared laughed, loudly, like the kind of laugh you use when you're performing for someone. That night, I didn't go to the gym like usual, didn't grab a casual dinner at the bar down the block. Instead, I went straight home, kicked off my shoes without turning on the lights, and sat at my kitchen table, laptop already under my arm like I knew I'd need it. The clock read 7:06 p.m. when I opened a fresh spreadsheet and typed, "Client Module Integrations, authored by eWard." It wasn't a confrontation. Not yet. Just a record. Just the first breath of something deliberate. I spent the next 2 hours listing every major client contribution I'd ever made: dates, Git commits, Slack receipts, Jira task IDs, downloaded PDFs of approval threads. If it had my fingerprint on it, I documented it, methodically, obsessively. Every placement of a navigation bar, every rewrite of a flawed data request pipeline. It hadn't mattered before. The results had spoken for themselves. But now those results were wearing someone else's name tag. Sometime around midnight, I saved the file, password protected it, and pushed it to a hidden Google Drive under a burner account. Then I stared at the screen, letting my mind trace the outline of what came next, because I wasn't going to play defense anymore. I wasn't going to wait for HR to investigate or hope the next project might remind people of what I could do. That kind of hoping. It was a trap. Jared had taught me that. I didn't need to tear him down. I just needed to route the truth back to where it belonged. Quietly. The first thing I checked was permissions. Our support portal backend had tiered access, and as a legacy admin from a time when we didn't have strict role segmentation, I still had level 3 credentials, which meant I could access customer routing logic. See where service inquiries were going, who was auto-assigned. I wasn't supposed to touch any of it post-promotion, but I hadn't been officially downgraded either. There were rules, dozens of them, shunting emails from high-tier clients directly to Jared's new Success Task Group. Fancy title masking a repackaged triage team, but the rules weren't locked, which meant they were editable. Filter by client includes Arroyo Biotech, then assigns to Jared's inbox. I copied that rule, cloned it, and changed the destination. A new email alias tied to our internal support name, not personalized, just Success Team, with a neutral signature, still part of the company, still above board. Then I tested it. I sent a fake inquiry from my personal account posing as Arroyo's VP subject line. Follow up on version control sync issue. It showed up in the test inbox I'd rerouted, not Jared's. From there, I let it roll. I didn't delete or break any system. I just quietly positioned myself back onto the front lines, one client at a time. When the real requests came in, I answered them under that alias. Cordial, helpful, prompt. No flair, no excuses. Just solutions. Sometimes I even beat their expectations. Spotted bugs no one had reported, cleaned up database flags, offered version patches, without being asked, and they responded. Some even said thanks using my name. Appreciate your help again, Elijah. It's always a relief when you're on the case. Inside the company, Jared's metrics stayed frozen. From his side, it must have looked like a lull. But from mine, I wasn't disappearing, I was consolidating. It wasn't about Jared anymore. Not really. He was just the symptom. The real illness was a workplace that only valued vision after someone else had pitched it, loudly enough. That mistook visibility for value. So I decided I'd operate from the shadows, build my case in clean code and customer trust. If they didn't remember who built the bridge, they'd remember who walked them across it. And when the time came, they'd wonder how it fell apart once I was gone. I didn't need to be everywhere, just in the right places. A few subtle filters at first, nothing flashy. I targeted the clients I had the deepest rapport with, ones I knew well enough to anticipate their issues before they even wrote them down. I never intercepted personal emails, only system-assigned support threads and automated scheduling requests. And even then, I was careful. My responses were informative, but neutral, avoiding anything that could look like a branding play. The point wasn't to make noise. The point was to quietly become indispensable. Every night after hours, I updated a second spreadsheet, a running log of incoming client requests, my solutions, and the time-stamped delivery of fixes. I color-coded each one that resulted in a direct thank you. Light blue, for standard acknowledgments. Green for praise that mentioned me by name. Orange for any email that asked me for input again within a week. There were a lot of oranges. That spreadsheet lived beside the first one, nested in a hidden folder that even I had encrypted twice over. The requests started to grow more specific. One client, a health tech firm we onboarded last year, began asking for feature enhancements that mirrored suggestions I had floated months ago during the initial integration phase. Suggestions Jared had dismissed as too engineering heavy. Now they were eager, hungry even, and since they thought they were reaching the official support task group, they had no idea it was me fielding those inquiries directly. I gave them mock-ups, internal prototype links, and documented back-end notes. I signed the emails as the collective team, but they always replied with, "Thanks, Elijah." Somehow still knowing, I could have stopped there. Let Jared wilt under the weight of his own silence. But I didn't stop because silence had become its own kind of power. Each fix, each appreciative reply, was a counterbalance to every ignored message back in the office. Teams still deferred to Jared in meetings, sure. But outside those walls, where clients lived and revenue formed, the pulse had shifted. I could feel it. One of the bigger signs came about 3 weeks in. Vivian, the client liaison for a large logistics company in our portfolio, forwarded a UX bug report to the company alias. She'd included a note that read, "Looping Elijah in as usual, he gets things done." That email had been copied to Jared too, but she hadn't directed it to him. That mattered. Jared called me that afternoon, randomly. No appointment on my calendar, just a vague "got a sec" message followed by a Zoom ring. I let it go to missed call and forwarded him a message saying I was tunneling deep on back-end logging discrepancies. Technically true, I was parsing through compression lag on our archive chain, but it wasn't anything that couldn't have waited. I just wasn't ready to sell the performance yet. Later that night, I watched another thread roll in. One of our East Coast commercial partners flagged a regression in their dashboard. Small thing search filters resetting under certain conditions, but annoying for their operators. I had built that dashboard customization from scratch the previous year. Jared wouldn't even have known the logic layers. It took me 42 minutes to fix, verify, and deploy silently to their branch. I wrote a clean changelog, attached it in the email, and ended with, "Let us know if you experience any further disruption." The client's reply landed less than 10 minutes later. "Brilliant. You guys should run training on proactivity." No names, no confetti. But I smiled anyway. By the end of week 4, internal dashboards started to show things Jared couldn't explain. His segment's satisfaction scores flatlined, some dipped. Meanwhile, the company-wide NPS netted up half a point the same. Half a point our exec VP had been chasing all quarter. I overheard Jared outside the micro kitchen one morning, trying to spin it to the marketing liaison. Sometimes there's a lag in recognition. People take time to warm to leadership changes. But the raw data told a different story. Tickets sent to his team got rerouted by automation. He just didn't know it. They were being resolved faster than usual, but not by the names listed on the org chart. They were solved under the alias mine. A lesser version of me would have displayed that. Could have outed the pipeline with a carefully crafted all-hands update. But I wasn't interested in short bursts of glory. I wanted the thread to pull itself loose. Management didn't respond well to confrontation. They responded to risk, loss, pressure from above. A few of the clients began copying in higher-ups when they sent follow-ups, and more than one of those notes had "Thank you, Elijah" baked right in. I wasn't correcting them. I wasn't hiding either. I was mounting carefully cataloged relevance. And relevance, treated right, becomes leverage. Let them keep to their scripts and org charts. I had momentum, and it moved faster than names on an email chain. All I had to do was keep quiet, keep consistent, and keep building. The warning shot arrived cloaked as a calendar invite. It was labeled Client Feedback Sync, Urgent, and it came from the office of our Chief Client Officer, Michelle Donahue. A 15-minute slot set less than 24 hours ahead with an optional call-in code and polite ambiguity in the invite description. Jared was tagged first, me a second, and 2 executive assistants added at the end for good measure. I knew before even opening the invite that this wasn't a sync. This was an ambush. Or maybe it was a test. The client in question, Ridgewell Partners, didn't typically request executive-level meetings. They had signed their initial 2-year contract only 9 months ago and had been relatively low-touch since launch, but I'd seen enough of their background threads and follow-ups to know they had been actively using all modules, especially the custom tracking interface I'd tailored during our earliest integration, so I clicked Accept, and then I waited. The meeting opened with Jared already on the call, his face tight and blandly confident, wearing the same smooth tone he used for boardroom summaries. Michelle joined moments later, lips pressed into a diplomatic smile. I cut my video on last, greeted them both, and focused on keeping my face unfamiliar, not angry, not eager, just present. Then Ridgewell's lead program officer, Dana Sorensen, popped into the call, followed by their procurement advisor, and to my surprise, their CTO. Based on facial expressions alone, I knew this wasn't going to be a simple chat. Dana didn't waste air. "We've been reviewing our contract renewal, and I'll be direct," she said. "If Elijah is not the primary on our program, we won't be continuing services." You could hear the air visibly rearrange itself on the executive floor. Jared blinked. Once, then again. "Wait," he started. "Just so I understand, are there performance concerns?" She cut him off. "No. Your response times have been acceptable. That's not the problem." Michelle leaned forward slightly. "We value clarity, Dana." "Can you expand on what's driving that position?" Dana didn't even glance at Jared. "Elijah's the one who communicates, who identifies issues before we even raise them. He's the one who provided the back-end logic explanation for our dashboard misfires last month. He's the one who added summary notes in his replies so my operators didn't need to open additional tickets." The CTO nodded silently beside her. "Respectfully, we've worked with consultants from dozens of firms, and most keep you floating in abstraction. Elijah doesn't. He just gets it." Dana looked right into her camera. "If he goes, we go, and we're moving fast, so kindly let us know by end of week." Jared's face was a frozen mask. He attempted to recover, leaning in with some babble about broader team alignment and leveraging core capacity, but it didn't land. Michelle lifted her hand mid-monologue, palm flat. "That's enough, Jared." He fell silent instantly. Dana ended the call with a clipped, "Thanks," and their side of the screen vanished. Michelle let the quiet sit for a beat. "Elijah," she said, "walk us through what they're referencing." I already had the deck open, a side-by-side breakdown of my logged client interventions, complete with timestamps, change logs, automated routing notes, and before and after analytics. I didn't color-code it or dress it up. I just shared my screen and let the data speak. No dramatics, just rows of proof. This is week by week, all impact recorded against our internal SLA window. Higher completion rate than any recorded under Team Jared, despite resource parity. Michelle narrowed her eyes, scrolling slowly. She muttered once under her breath, not loud enough to catch. Jared sat like a statue as the screen filled with evidence of his absence. When I stopped my share, Michelle turned to him, voice steady. "What percentage of client interactions did you personally handle last month?" Jared opened his mouth but didn't speak. A second passed. Then 2. "I authorized all final outputs," he said, finally. Michelle's eyebrow arched like a drawbridge. That's not what I asked. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was decisive. And when she broke it, she did so without ceremony. Effective immediately, Elijah's reassigning under enterprise accounts as strategic liaison. Jared, you'll transition to internal platform support. No client-facing contact for the time being. He looked like something had unplugged behind his eyes. Consider this a realignment of responsibilities, she added, standing. Appreciate your cooperation. The call ended nearly as fast as it started. I didn't exhale until the little squares disappeared and my screen returned to desktop. I didn't gloat. I didn't even grin. But I did pull up the folder I'd been building since the start, renamed it Final Export, and marked a clean tab labeled Done. Now I drink my coffee on the balcony. No Slack pings. No early syncs with someone hovering behind me to double-check what I'm doing. Just the sound of the street below and the smell of something real. After I turned in my notice, it only took 3 days before Ridgewell reached out with a formal proposal. They wanted to move fast and made it clear they had a budget ready. I didn't hesitate. Their offer wasn't just generous, it was personal. They respected what I did, trusted how I worked, and didn't need me to defend my worth because they'd seen it firsthand. A second client, Cantera Metrics, followed suit after catching wind of the Ridgewell transition. They phrased it as continued partnership. But let's be honest, it didn't come without its own smirk of revenge tucked inside. I'd worked with their operations lead for 2 years. She knew who had followed up after hours and who had skimmed the ticket summaries. The third client was quieter. They circled for weeks, the way old-school companies do when they're navigating procurement red tape. But then an email came through, just a single line in the body, no fluff. If your availability is still open, let's chat Monday. 3 firm calls later, and I had a third contract lined up. Now I set my hours. I dictate my load. I call it a consultancy, but it feels more like freedom. I choose the projects I actually care about, the teams that don't need managing, and the emails I want to answer. The rest, I ignore. I don't work weekends. I don't chase unpaid scope creep under some client-first mantra. I build lasting systems and then walk away before anyone can bury them in bureaucracy. That's the life I carved out from the mess. As for Jared, I didn't go looking. But things find you when they're meant to. I ran into Micah, our former shared account analyst, at a client summit in Chicago. He didn't even wait for drinks before dropping the update. Heard about the shakeup, he said, eyebrows up. Jared's on mobile app regression now, not even core platform, just bug cycles and notification tests. I sipped from my cup, neutral. He's still with the company. Micah nodded. Yeah, but barely. Word is partner track closed to him. Someone pulled his prior project audits for review. Stuff didn't line up. That last part hit harder than I expected. Not because I cared much about Jared's fate by then, but because it landed with a kind of symmetry. I never needed to sink him, I just needed to stop letting him rise on my shoulders. What caught up with him wasn't revenge, it was exposure. Truth has its own schedule, sometimes slow, sometimes surgical, but always arriving. I don't hate Jared. I don't need him punished or disgraced or groveling for forgiveness. He made his choice. He saw opportunity in someone else's work and wrapped it in his own label. That's not uncommon, but it's never permanent. Not when the roots don't match the tree. I do still remember his face when that Zoom call ended, the way his camera froze just long enough to catch the first flicker of panic in his eyes. I'm not proud of enjoying it, but I did. Quietly. Now when I smile, it's smaller. Not smug, not loud, just honest. Because this version of my life wasn't handed to me in a promotion memo, or announced over catered lunches with branded binders. It came from answering midnight emails without complaint, from knowing how to speak plain when everyone else wrapped things in jargon, from remembering that a client only cares who fixes the thing, not who's listed on the slide. Justice doesn't always come with a gavel or applause. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like an email routed to the right inbox at just the right time. Sometimes the best seat at the table is the one you build for yourself. And these days, I only sit at tables I built, where the work starts and ends with my name.